there a risk that employers are going to become more authoritarian? It's a question that my next guest has tackled, and she thinks the answer is yes. A Tory peer claimed last week that companies should have a legal obligation to support the health of their staff. But Fiona Bulmer is worried that that would lead to firms pushing employees to lead a healthier life. She says managers would feel able to ask all sorts of questions, from a person's drinking habits and how much they exercise to their COVID vaccination status. I'm delighted to say Fiona Bulmer joins me now. Thanks for coming on. So can you give us some examples of the kind of thing that you're talking about here, where employers are effectively intervening and trying to find out too much about their staff? Yeah, absolutely. So you've got Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's boast that they've created well-being champions, and you think, yeah, that's all sounds great. Then you look at the remit of these people, and their remit is nutrition, sleep, and exercise of their colleagues. So, effectively, they're going to be the biscuit police. You know, we had that woman banning cake last week. These people are going to be going around saying, oh, you're looking a bit porky today. Should you really be having those biscuits? I mean, you mentioned that the Food Standard Agency, the representative there, said that employees should ban cake in the office, or that cake is equivalent to passive smoking. Yeah. I mean, but I suppose they're just looking out for people's health, aren't they? Well, that's what they claim. Yeah. But I mean, the reality is that we used to think that when you got to 18, you were able to make your own decisions about how much you ate. You know, if you were fond of cream cakes or packets of hobnobs, well, that was your affair, and you had the right, in a free society, to make those decisions, and maybe they were bad for you, but that was your choice. Now, the public health tyrants, and they are tyrants, have got a completely different way of running society, which is that we are too incompetent and too weak-willed to make those decisions, even as adults. So we have to get your employer in to remove these temptations and to make you thinner and happier, because you're too weak-willed as an adult to do that. How could they possibly monitor sleep, though? I mean, you mentioned sleep. What, do they expect you to fill out a chart or something, or wear a device? Well, you wonder, and that's the thing, and that's what worries me. I mean, a lot of this is absurd, but once you say to line managers, you have a responsibility for your employees' health. Now, what you're going to do as a line manager, you're going to think, well, I've got to do something about it. And what are they going to do? Well, they're going to say, oh, well, you know, you're looking a bit tired. What can we do? Let's have a little chat about it. And I bet there are performance reviews going on now, perhaps not with sleep, but performance reviews where people are saying, yeah, you perhaps ought to think about going to the gym or going to the mindfulness class. I suppose, Fiona, though, a lot of people will criticise you and say, but this is a slippery slope fallacy. You know, these people aren't saying we're going to ban you from eating cake or force you to go on a 20-mile run or whatever. What they're doing is they're just offering good advice. That would be the argument, I think. That would be the argument, but you know, it is a slippery slope, because you can see it already. Another example I found was PwC, the accountants. They're encouraging their employees to become vegans. Well, what business is it of theirs? And they're running this campaign in their canteen called Peas Please. Well, you do that with 5-year-olds. What's the rationale behind that? I mean, why do they want people to be vegan? Well, they say it's healthier, and obviously it's better for the environment, so you've got, you know, they're claiming that it's all the climate change stuff as well. OK, but is it healthier? Do they know any vegans? Well, they're very weak. Well, precisely. I mean, that's exactly it. And this is the trouble, that they're setting these... A lot of these standards are just nonsense, because they're interfering. And, yeah, maybe they're not going to be completely authoritarian about it, but we saw with COVID, people had their sick pay docked if they hadn't had COVID vaccinations in some companies. So some companies are going to take it that far. Not all of them, and hopefully people will rise up against it, but some will. And there's also the potential for shaming, isn't there? I mean, if you've got these, as you mentioned with Sainsbury's, actual sort of initiatives that are going on, where people are almost competing in terms of how healthy they are, then there's the potential for people to feel pressured or shamed into having a certain type of lifestyle. Well, exactly. This is it. It's all corporate conformity now. You know, increasingly corporates are worried about what you think, your views on things. And precisely this, they're going to be suggesting that this is a better way to live, and try and
shame people, because that's what the public health people believe.
This is part of a broader conversation, I think, about the relationship between the employer and the employee, because, of course, you have a lot of corporations who are putting out very overtly political statements these days, saying we support this movement or that movement. But where does that leave the employer who disagrees, the employee, rather, who disagrees with those particular views? Yeah,
precisely, and that's what really worries me, that there is a set of views now that you're supposed to hold if you work in a big corporate, and there's a fundamental contradiction. I work for a lot of corporate companies and write corporate guff, and they're full of stuff about, oh, we need disruptors, we need diverse minds. And that's true, actually. Innovation in corporates does come from people who think differently. And yet, at the same time, their whole diversity, this whole health, well-being stuff, is all really narrowly focused on the current orthodoxy, on climate change, on diversity, on what counts as a healthy life. And so, you used to go to work. They paid you to do it. You did your best. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. But you went home, and what you did was none of your employer's business. Yes, and it should remain so, of course. But what advice would you give, just before we finish? Because I want to know what you think in terms of that pressure. Because I know I used to be a teacher. I'm still in contact with lots of teachers who say we have to sit through these unconscious bias sessions. I want to say this is all a load of rubbish, but I daren't, because if I do that, I'm not going to get promoted. When the promotion comes up, my career prospects are going to be limited. So on a practical level, how can employees make their displeasure known without jeopardising their own career? I think it's really difficult, and sadly I think there isn't much room for the contrary people anymore in corporate life. But I think you've got to be brave. We've all got to be brave, and it's really hard because the costs are quite high. But I think you do have to say, hang on a minute, and you have to make fun of it. Make fun of the biscuit police. Bring in a packet of hobnobs and scoff them in front of the well-being champion. Just try and make fun of it, because it's so ridiculous, and hopefully the sheer eccentricity and contrariness of certainly British workers might prevail, and they might row back eventually. So there you have it. Eat as much cake at work as possible. Absolutely. That's the advice. OK, Fiona Bulmer, thank you very much for joining me.